Hello, and thank you for joining me for our Sleep, Eat, Move series and to start off our webinar series that we're putting out. We have a few key topics that we want to discuss that'll help you have a long, active, healthy life. And as we look forward to the coming weeks, these are the topics that we're going to look at. We love exercise. Both resistance and cardiovascular training are required, and we'll break those down separately. Before that, we'll talk about nutrition and how to look at nutrition from a standpoint to maximize health, not necessarily for weight loss. But today, one that's often overlooked is sleep. Sleep quality, sleep duration, these have a massive impact on how healthy you are day to day and your long-term health and vitality. So we'll dig into that one today. As you can see here, coming up in a few weeks, we'll have focus/ADD mental clarity as a topic as well, and then some more topics coming your way after that. Sleep, what we're going to talk about today, how much do we need? How much sleep is enough? Why do we need it? What goes on while we sleep? What can get in the way in our lifestyle as far as sleep quality? And how can we optimize that sleep? There's a lot of different factors that can interfere, get in the way, aside from babies and letting the dog out and a few other things like that. But we have the power to improve that. There's a few things that we can add in to make our sleep better. So we'll talk about a few of those aspects. The overall starting point that we want to understand is that sleep is not a passive process. While we cognitively kind of shut down, we don't really know much about what's going on. And even when we dream, oftentimes we forget that when we wake up. We really don't know too much consciously about what goes on underneath. But we have to remember that this is an active biological process where there are many, many necessary events for our health going on while we are unconscious or subconscious. Those are required for proper health and function. Every species that's been studied sleeps in some way or another, which shows that this is not just something silly that our body decided to do. From a standpoint of evolutionary advantage, it seems kind of silly that we would shut ourselves down and make ourselves open to predators and not be productive for a third of our lives. But that should tell us how important sleep is. So this quote from Dr. Matthew Walker, PhD, he's a sleep researcher. He says, sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset the body and brain every day. And as we get older, as I went from my 20s, 30s, 40s, now pushing into 50s, I realized that more and more and more. So what actually happens when we sleep? There are a few major events and then a whole bunch of other ones. Sleep is very important for tissue repair. For those of you who work out, you can be sore, you go to bed, you wake up the next day, you're less sore. It's simple things like that. It's when your body is less engaged or active in other processes, it can focus on healing up soft tissues, repairing injuries, and rebuilding processes. From a hormone standpoint, hormones for growth, repair, stress response, the reproductive cycle, reproductive health, digestion, all of those are very active at night and help us to regulate, recover, and prep for the coming days, weeks, months ahead. A certain portion of function that we don't often think about is the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord, go through a cleaning and restorative process. We hear about the lymphatic system that deals with our immune system overall and cleaning up our bloodstream and our soft tissues and the lymphatics. Within the nervous system, it's called the glymphatics. The actual nerve cells kind of shrink, and then we increase this activity of cells that go around and pick up cellular debris, beta amyloid plaques, and other things like that, and clean those out each night. That is what gets rid of the waste products in the central nervous system. So it's vitally important from a brain health standpoint that we get the sleep that we need. Though that process, if we don't do that correctly, it's linked to cognitive decline and dementia as we go forward. Certain stages of sleep are vital for certain particular functions, and we'll get into that. So when we measure the brain function overnight while we sleep, again, we're not just shut down. The brain is not turned off. It's active in various stages at different times. And we can see that on the graph here. When we measure brain function, it is correlated to the different stages of sleep. And so we can tell through brain scans where in a certain stage of sleep a person is. So in one night, you go through several cycles of those various stages, as you see on the bottom graph there. It's not a static state. You're going to go deeper into sleep, then come back up, and then a deeper stage, and then back up. And as you can also see from that graph, early in the night, there are different lengths and condensation or concentration of those certain stages of sleep. And then as we get to the morning, that changes to facilitate different functions within the brain and body. So as you go through that depth on that bottom chart, as the slide shows you here, there's two different kind of key components of how we define sleep stages. And they look at REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement. That was the first thing they noticed. So the rapid eye movement, sorry, it's covered by my picture there, but that is for memory and cognition and processing and regulating some of the things that we've learned, and very important for critical thinking and things like that. That is highly concentrated toward the first portion of the night, and less so as we get toward the morning. The lighter stages, the non-REM sleep, where our eyes aren't bouncing around, it's a very complicated naming strategy they use. Either your eyes are moving or they're not. In the non-REM, they break it down into different stages too, based on the brain waves. And so in the light sleep, that's where we'll get into some emotional regulation, some tissue repair, and things like that. As we get into the early stages of morning, that's where we see it. So what happens if we don't get enough sleep overall? This is if we cut our nights short over and over, or we have certain things in life that will continue to get in the way. What happens if we don't get enough, if we deprioritize proper sleep? Cognitive decline is often the first one that will be evident, and that's memory, attention, focus, reaction time is a big one. Mental and emotional health will go right there with that. We have increased anxiety, depression, emotional regulation, inability to cope with certain environments, stress resilience, all of that stuff starts to decline. Then we can see immune function, and this is a big one where they think sleep actually interacts with longevity. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're going to get sick a little bit more often, or your body at least has a less ability to fight off certain things. As an example, within our immune system, there are special cells, they call these killer T cells, and they're the ones that roam around looking for cells that aren't acting appropriately, like cancer cells and things like that, that aren't appropriately functioning or structured, and it breaks those down. As we lose sleep, especially chronically, those killer T cell populations plummet, and it happens very quickly, and it's compounded over time. So our immune function very much suffers. And so there's speculation that chronic sleep debt or sleep loss is associated with higher cancer rates. Metabolic dysfunction, one of the things that we see is that inadequate sleep is associated with insulin resistance, the inability for your body to handle the food that you take in appropriately. You can't fully and adequately manage those resources, so it does lead to insulin resistance, diabetes, obesity. Pain sensitivity and inflammation are big ones that we'll often see. You know, if you are someone who works out, recovery is less, your body's achy, stiff, sore. For people who haven't had good quality sleep for a long time, you find yourself stiff, achy, and sore. And when you've had injury and to the point where it is slow, increasing sleep can help speed that up. And then, as it says at the bottom, increased cancer risk, as I mentioned before, from the immune dysfunction. It's one of the key long-term health implications that sleep's been associated with. The stages of sleep throughout the night, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, change. At the beginning of the night, we have a certain sleep structure that facilitates certain functions. And then as we get closer to the morning, that shifts and does other things. So as it says here, early in the night, we get into physical repair. The glymphatics kick in, which means we can clear out the waste products in the brain, and neurological pruning. So what that is we build all these connections early in life and throughout the stages of our life between our neurons. And in order to be efficient, we'll trim some of those back that we don't need. That's what pruning is, and that happens while we're sleeping. Memory consolidation is huge in that early portion of the night. So if you're a student who is staying up late to cram for an exam, as we can see, this function actually happens in that early portion of the night, right? So it can actually limit the ability for you to remember those things in the morning. And then cardiovascular recovery happens early in the evening as well. As we shift over into the morning, this is often at least evident in many people, as we have to get up early or cut our sleep short in the mornings. Emotional regulation and stress regulation can be a problem. It does impact also creativity, motor skill learning, refinement, mood stability, and emotional resilience as well. We get a little grumpy. We can't quite pull things off the same way that we would if we got a full night's sleep. So your schedule definitely affects your ability to function at its best. When we deal with it from a standpoint of chronic loss, there are impacts to both the body and the brain. We talk about feeling groggy from things, or I'm always tired. Yeah, those are apparent and often very associated with sleep. But there are things that we don't think that might be associated with sleep that have been very solidly correlated. In the brain, as we talked about, we have certain functions that have to take place. So poor sleep over time impacts learning, memory, decision-making, emotional regulation, and reaction time. Long-term, increased dementia risk and increased injury and accident risk, whether that's car accident, workplace injury, slip and falls. And with that, we get into an increase in all-cause mortality. If you're chronically at a sleep deficit, you have a statistically significant increased chance of death on any given day, simply because your body's not prepped to handle the stresses of the day and your brain's not online fully to handle what's coming your way. In the body, inflammation, hormone disruption, insulin resistance are all jacked way up. It just can't work the way that it's supposed to, because that recovers, restores, and resets overnight. And injury and healing is increased as well. By age and stage of life, our sleep does different things. So obviously when we're infants and kids, our brain's building at a phenomenal rate. It's one of the highest in the life between infants, children, and adolescents. That's when most of that stuff happens. So brain development can be impacted, learning, memory, and emotional regulation. We've seen it all with kids who miss a nap or don't get the full night's sleep. It can be a bit of a train wreck there. In adolescence, one of the things that we notice is that, especially in teens, they want to stay up later and they want to sleep later. Research shows that's actually appropriate for their age. And we'll even see this in adults. Different people within the population will shift and typically work better as sleeping later, and others will shift earlier in the night. But in teens especially, almost universally, they're going to be shifted to a later bedtime and do well with sleeping a little bit later. We run into issues with that, obviously, because they have to fit into our lifestyle in North America, certain set times for when mom and dad have to go to work, when school starts, when the bus comes, all of those things. But there's really cool studies that have gone on where school districts that have shifted to a later start time actually have much better scholastic performance in their kids, and phenomenally a hugely reduced number of automobile accidents and therefore fatalities in that age group. It's something that's really, really important, but very much overlooked. In adults, obviously, cognitive performance and focus declines quickly. If we string together a few nights with low sleep, we're going to know about it. We can't form thoughts very well. We can't put things together. We're slower. We're not operating at our best. So productivity and our ability to handle stress falters, and therefore mood comes right after that. In our aging population, in older adults, often we will see a harder time getting to sleep and staying asleep. So what happens then is they'll start to go to bed earlier and earlier. You know, the stereotypical blue plate special where you get dinner at 4:30 so you can be in bed by 6. Those things happen because it's harder and harder to get good quality sleep. As that happens with them, we notice big increase in fall risk, injury, balance, coordination, cognition, and as we mentioned, progression of dementia and cognitive decline. So what do we actually need by age and stage? When we're brand new, babies need a lot, and some babies will sleep almost all the time, right when they first are born, and then it'll slowly reduce over time. But typically, infants and very young toddlers, 12 to 16 hours a day. That's naps included. And that is huge for body development, brain development, nervous system, learning all those things and how they interact with their environment and making the connections it needs to for them to grow and thrive. As we get into school age, we still need quite a bit, 9 to 13 hours. It goes down a little bit each year, or each few years as they progress through that school age time period, but we still have this huge amount of growth in neurology and cognitive function that has to be established while we sleep. So essential for physical growth, your immune system, cognitive function, and neuroplasticity. In teens, 8 to 10 hours, again, most likely shifted a little bit later, supports ongoing brain development. That's the second highest connection and pruning period where they start to redefine who they are and how they fit into the world, how their body works. Puberty's got all sorts of things going on, learning, mental health, and we see a big association with sleep and mental health struggles in this age group. In adults, and this is all ages of adults, 7 to 9 hours, it's required for all those functions that we've talked about, necessary for recovery, cognitive performance, physical recovery, emotional regulation, and many, many factors in long-term health and vitality. I used to be this guy. I was, through my college age especially, 5 hours was, I figured myself pretty good. Doesn't affect me much. I can get by on 5 hours just fine. I worked late and I was up early. What I didn't understand at that time was feeling functional does not equal being fully rested. I put demands on my schedule, on my body, on my life that really cut the opportunity that I had to sleep. And so that's all I really had, and I got by. That's all it was getting by. And so what I also didn't know is that sleep debt is cumulative. It had effects that eventually I felt. The brain adapts to sleep loss in the short term because it doesn't really have a choice, but performance will continue to decline. Mood, focus, reaction time, decision making, those are all impaired without our covert or our overt awareness of it. We've never really had the opportunity. For someone who sleeps 5.5 hours every night, they don't really know what life would be like at 7, 8, or 9 hours of sleep because they've never really given it a chance on a consistent basis. Those functions do increase and improve with time. Each short night that you have adds to an ongoing sleep debt. So that's where we've lost. We can't get back because it's building and building. All of those processes that have to happen when we sleep, it's all adding up. We can't catch up on the weekend. There's simply not enough to reverse the effects that we've had during the week. And then cognitive performance and attention, increased emotional reactivity, stress sensitivity, all of those things we get used to. And so essentially, even though we're getting by, we just turn into a stressed out, grumpy person who's not performing as well as they could if they had more sleep. So yeah, you're getting by, but that's not really what life should be about. There are, however, different patterns, and I mentioned this with teens, but in adults as well, there are different patterns where people tend to function better than others. And so there is a very, very rare genetic condition to where someone doesn't need as much sleep, and we've heard a few stories like this, but statistically speaking, it's essentially 0% of the population. So most of us, we still need that 7 to 9 hours. The overwhelming majority, 100% of us statistically need that 7 to 9 hours for everything to work as it's supposed to, but that doesn't mean we have to get it at the same time. For me, I'm what the researchers often refer to as a morning lark, which means I do well. I get up in the morning, I function well at that point. But then as we get toward the evening, I'm usually one of the first guys starting to kind of wrap things up. I'll head to bed before some of the night owls. Night owls will typically stay up later, be really functional, and often have some of their better work into the evening or early part of the night, and sometimes even late at night. And then they'll get that 7 to 9 hours stretching late into the morning where I've already been up for quite a few hours. It's not a bad thing. It's just a different situation for different people. What we have to remember for that is that you have to structure your life to best facilitate that. So this is the challenge that we mentioned earlier with teenagers. They may be night owls at that time, but school demands, an 8:30 start time. So they're up to catch a bus that comes at 7 or 7:30. So they got to be up by 6 or 6:30. And so what we're doing is staying up late as a night owl and then cutting it short by our lifestyle constraints. And then we have this chronic sleep debt that will then come out with cognitive performance, moody, irritability, and some physical health issues. So once we identify what our personality is or our sleep type, then we have to facilitate our life around it in order for us to work at our best. So what are some of the things that can get in the way of sleep? Some of these are very obvious, and we work with a lot of families, a lot of parents, and of course there are so many moms and dads out there that are going to say babies are number one. There's no such thing as a great night's sleep with infants always waking up all the time. Similar kids, even through the toddler ages, they need you, and there are some interruptions there. So kids aren't even on the list, but they are a big one. So these are some of the things that we can control, though. So number one, stress and hyperarousal. So our busy brain, we lay down in bed, end up staring at the wall or the clock, brain's going a mile a minute, and just trying to sort through, what happened today? What do I have to do for tomorrow? All of these things. So that stress and hyperarousal will make it to where we can't fall asleep, and it'll sometimes even wake us up, or we'll dream about those things, and that'll wake us up. So the stress is a big one. Caffeine is one of those things that we'll use in order to overcome prior sleep debt, but then that can interfere with sleep the next night. So what we end up with is this ability, you go to sleep, and again, you can't fall asleep because chemically, the caffeine has interfered with the sleep pressure that builds in the brain. Sleep apnea is becoming more and more common. It's one of those situations where there's a lot of factors that feed into it, but if you're not breathing appropriately while you're sleeping, then your brain, starved for oxygen, will wake you up and look for it. There are a lot of factors that go into that. Weight gain is a big one. They say about 70% of sleep apnea is associated with being overweight or obese. And if you lose weight, sleep apnea can improve. Alcohol is a big one. We often associate, even the phrase nightcap right before you go to bed, or in the evening is typically when people imbibe in alcohol. But even though it's associated with that feeling of drowsiness, alcohol by definition is a sedative. It does sedate the brain, but the sleep that we get under the influence of alcohol is not natural restorative sleep. It suppresses the deep REM sleep and increases awakenings overnight. Pain is a big one too. It will interrupt sleep, especially the restorative sleep, as we toss and turn and try to get into a comfortable position. So there are strategies that we can use to eliminate pain and get more restful sleep. So tips for better sleep. What can we do? A lot of this is strategy, and this is where the process of me going from someone who was functioning on 5.5 to 6 hours of sleep has different priorities now, and able to put that into a lifestyle. Because one of the big factors that people will see as adults, or people will explain as adults, is I can't make it work. I can't get more. I can't get a greater opportunity for sleep. Number one, we have to understand that sleep is vital, and we have to make it non-negotiable in our lives. We have to make it a priority. And this is why we put this webinar first in this series. Sleep must be prioritized, definitely over streaming the latest episode of your favorite show, scrolling on social media, late night snacking, just one more episode, I got to watch the end of the game. All of those things have to be a lower priority than getting quality sleep in your life. So we have to choose a target for the number of hours of sleep and then build around that. Up next to that is reverse engineer your routine. So once we figure out, I want X amount of sleep. So for me, I've prioritized, I need 7. Okay. I know that's the bottom end of the recommended spectrum. My kids and family have some requirements. Our work has requirements. I need exercise. All these things make it to where I can commit consistently to getting 7 hours of sleep. And that's the decision-making process that I went through to get to that number. It's not just arbitrary. So from that, we have to work backwards, right? So I need 7 hours. I know that in order to get to work or to get my workout in on time, I have to get up at a certain time. Now we work backwards and we know when bedtime is. So then once you know when bedtime has to be, then we know, okay, what are the things I have to do in order to be able to go to bed? Let out the dog, lock the door, prep the coffee for the next day, brush my teeth, whatever it is, get the laundry put away. All of those things. We reverse engineer the bedtime routine that allows us to be prepped and ready for the next day. That's how we can start then winding down. And with that, we then get into that third step, which is set a consistent schedule. So if the goal is 7 hours and your wake up time is fixed, your bedtime has to be fixed as well. Your evening routine should prepare your body and your morning and your brain for success. That's the whole point of it. Then we optimize our sleep strategy. And so there's a few different factors that we'll get into in just a moment. So how can we set things up to where that 7 hours that I spend in bed, I'm going to get the most out of it. I'm going to get the best quality sleep for the most duration. And then basically set yourself up for success. And then support your nervous system in a way that allows it to shut down. So there's a bunch of different factors that we're going to get into that. But really what we want to do is reduce stress, calm the stress response, reduce pain, improve comfort, support deeper, more restorative sleep. And we'll get a little bit more specific on those. So what can we do? As we kind of alluded to, our wake up time is set by the things that we have to do. So our sleep time is then set once we figure out how much sleep that we're going to prioritize. So consistency is important. Our brain, humans are phenomenally geared toward structure. We like repetition, we like routine, we like patterns, we like cycles. So consistent sleep and wake times are very, very important. So for me, I'm up early during the week. I'm the first one up by a couple hours on the weekend as well. So that consistency has made it to where that routine is easier to keep. And as I said, you're not going to catch up on your sleep debt over the weekend anyway. So keeping that routine, getting to bed at a decent time, get up at a decent time. So obviously, as we said, establish a bedtime routine. Caffeine. Caffeine obviously is there to have an impact on your brain, to make you feel more awake and alert. It is the most utilized drug in the world. It is a compound from the outside that we use to affect our brain. It is a psychoactive drug. I love coffee. I drink it most days. But we have to be careful about when we drink it and how much. So our loose rule, avoid caffeine, or well, actually, it's not even that loose. Avoid caffeine within 8 hours of bedtime. We all know people who say, oh, I could have a cup of coffee and go straight to bed. That is not an appropriate response by your nervous system, and your sleep is suffering as a consequence. Cutting caffeine 8 hours before bedtime will improve sleep quality. Manage evening screen time. So this is correlated, and I'm going to mention this a couple different ways. Really what it comes down to, there's two aspects of this. One, the stimulation, whatever you're looking at, whether that's sporting events, if you're watching a show. So the stimulation aspect of it, you're not winding your brain down to get ready for bed. But then there's the other component where LED screens, which is pretty much all of what we're looking at, use blue light, which stimulates a part of the brain that tells the brain it's morning. Our brain is geared for blue in the morning, kind of red, orange, yellow at night. So those screens on your phone, on your tablet, on your TV are stimulating your brain to kind of trick it into thinking this is not time to wind down. It's actually time to be alert and awake. So if you flick off your show, roll over and try to go to sleep, your brain is just not ready. So managing screen time in the evening, we'll get specific on that in just a moment. We talked about this just a minute ago, limiting alcohol. Alcohol is huge. It's massive as far as a social impact. You know, involved in a lot of ritual and social engagements that we do. It's a part of life for a lot of people. So limiting alcohol, especially later in the evening, or eliminating it from your life completely, will positively impact your health and your sleep. Similarly, limiting late evening meals and snacking will improve digestion. Indigestion can limit your sleep quality as well. We talked about this just a second ago, dimming the lights in the evening. Similar to the blue lights, as we shifted from incandescent lighting to LED lighting, most of that light is on the blue end of the spectrum and it's super bright. So at least what we're going to do is dim it. We have those slim inline LED lights in our house. They look great, but we have nearly all of them on dimmers. So as we go into the bedroom, getting ready for the night, the light's on, but it's turned way down low as compared to what we have in the morning. Or we'll use the little bedside lamps and not the overhead lights. And then cool bedroom temperature, as low as 16 degrees. So our furnace is set in our house to where kind of later afternoon, early evening, it actually starts cooling down. And so it's set I believe, to 15 degrees overnight. It doesn't actually get to 15 degrees in the night, but especially as we sleep on the second floor. But as it kind of gears down, it gets cooler and cooler and cooler, and that actually gets you much better sleep. One of the very common things that people will think of, ask about, and resort to, unfortunately, is a pharmaceutical intervention to force their brain to shut down. So sleeping pills, that's exactly what they do. It is not natural restorative sleep, and you do not get the same sleep benefits. The brain waves do not mimic normal sleep. You don't get to that deep stages of cleansing restorative sleep that improves nervous system function, and actually does quite the opposite. Because of that, we get what they refer to as rebound insomnia. You're groggy, you're less functional the next day, and it's harder to get to sleep without those medications. For many people, it's habit forming, very high addiction potential, and prone to abuse. There's cognitive effects, memory, and your brain just simply doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. It affects that deep, it prevents that deep, slow wave brain activity where the lymphatics clean out the brain. And so things get really groggy and slow down. Because of that also, and the overall fatigue, increased risk of falls, accidents, and therefore all-cause mortality. People who use sleeping pills on a regular basis have a significant increased risk of fall on increased risk of death on any given day, any given year. So it's not that those are completely off the table, but should be pretty much emergency use only, and for a very, very short amount of time. That is not actual sleep, and there are significant consequences to regular use. So what can we do from a standpoint of what can we take? There are a couple compounds we recommend very regularly for sleep overall. Nutritional supplements are different than pharmaceuticals. A lot of these are derived naturally. We recommend magnesium quite often. Now, when you look at magnesium, there are a lot of different forms. Magnesium is the element that we're actually recommending, and then in the name of the supplement, there's often another word. So magnesium bisglycinate, magnesium oxalate, magnesium citrate. That second word, the binder, dictates where in the body it can go. And that will then influence what it can do and how it can help you. The two forms of magnesium that we like in terms of aiding sleep, magnesium bisglycinate, which also does quite a bit as far as muscle tension and overall calm and ease. But most specifically for sleep, I really like magnesium L-threonate. The L-threonate binder on magnesium will cross the blood-brain barrier 70% better than any other form of magnesium. So when you look at a bottle of a supplement and it says magnesium on the front, we got to flip over to the back. What kind? What is that binder? Where is it allowed to go? What impact is it going to have? Some of those binders aren't really well absorbed at all, and so it just passes through your digestive system. So they're good for constipation because they clear out the bowel, but they don't actually get absorbed and have no real positive effect on overall vitality and health, unless your issue is constipation. So magnesium bisglycinate, magnesium L-threonate. In conjunction with magnesium L-threonate, we'll often pair L-theanine. L-theanine by itself, even during the day, is associated with reduced anxiety, depression, increasing calm, helps with focus. We give this one to our kids too. So L-theanine and magnesium L-threonate are a good pair as far as sleep, improving sleep quality, the ability for the brain to calm down and get to sleep. Traditional chamomile tea, lemon balm tea, both of those calm the nervous system, get you ready for sleep. Remember with that, move it a little bit earlier in the evening, not right before bed, because then 45 minutes to an hour and a half later, you got to get up to go to the bathroom, and we're trying not to fragment sleep. So make sure you shift that a little bit earlier. Lavender and a few other essential oils and aromatherapy type solutions are good to calm the nervous system as well. And then CBD can be helpful as well. We love this approach. Chiropractic care, obviously this is what we do for a living. We've seen it. We hear these results week in and week out. People came in to get help in one area. We ask them how things are going after those first couple visits, and they say, hey, that's going well. However, I've noticed I'm getting much better sleep. I'm able to sleep deeper, longer, and I feel so much more rested in the morning. It does that through a few different things. Nervous system regulation is a big one. Calms the stress response, shifts over from the sympathetic side, which is where the adrenal fight or flight stress response is, shift over to the parasympathetics, which is referred to as rest and digest. It allows the nervous system to engage in that deep, restful sleep. Improve sleep mechanics and posture. We can basically get into a more comfortable position, and that goes hand in hand with pain reduction that's mentioned there. Muscle relaxation as well, and then deeper, full, more restorative breathing as well. So chiropractic care can have a massive impact on sleep, and we hear that all the time. One of the questions that we get in regard to sleep is, how should I sleep? Horizontally with your eyes closed are the two best starting points, but aside from that, people will often say, back, side. The truth is, either of those are okay. Both of those have their advantages. Side sleeping, generally considered the most supportive for the spine, keeps your spine in a neutral position, promotes better position and better breathing and less snoring typically, and helps with a few different things during pregnancy as well. On your back is pretty good, supports spinal alignment. You can put a pillow under your knees to take some of the load off the low back. Often this will increase snoring. So if you're in a in a shared bed relationship, this one can get a few complaints from your partner. Even though you're having a great sleep, you might get an elbow or a poke and telling you to roll onto your side. That's kind of the trade-off, and it can have an impact on sleep apnea and reflux as well. Some people really love stomach sleeping, and to be honest, if that's the only way you can get good sleep, then that might have to be how it is in the short term. However, it's really rough on the lower neck and the low back. Less snoring, but it might beat you up in the long term. Unless you're wearing a snorkel, you have to crank your head all the way to the side to kind of get into that position, and it's pretty rough on the low back too. So ideally, side or back, stomach sleeping if you have to, but whatever position gets you the best sleep is a really good answer for that. As we wrap up, we got a little challenge for you, taking some of these recommendations and putting them into play. So we got a 10-day sleep challenge. So I know some of these may seem like massive changes to your life and lifestyle, but for a short period of time, it's worth it to try and see what kind of an effect it can have on the quality of sleep and therefore how you feel the next day. So we've got 6 things here that we're gonna challenge you to do for a 10-day period. The first one, the same routine. Chronobiology, our cycle, our rhythm that we get into, do the reverse engineering. What time do I have to get up? What time do I have to go to bed? What do I have to do to get ready for bed? Figure all that stuff out, find that routine, and create your bedtime routine. For some people, that's going to include a little bit of mobility work, so I'm not as stiff in the morning. For some people, it's just, brush my teeth, let out the dog. Some people, it's just lay down and close my eyes. Figure out your routine and set that and do the same thing each night so that your brain gets wired into that concept of it's time to go to bed. Cool, dark room. It's winter here right now, and so it can be as simple as crack the window in your bedroom overnight. It can be as more technologically savvy as you set your thermostat to gear things down overnight. There are mattress toppers now and blankets that will cool you and all that stuff. If you really want to get high tech, you can keep it simple, but try to bring the temperature down in your room and eliminate as many lights as possible. If you're someone who has an alarm clock there on the bedside table, turn that to face away from you, put a cover over the top, cover up the little light. If there's a blinking light on the smoke detector, if there's any other source of light in the room, blackout curtains are great for this too. Make it as dark and cool as possible. No food 2 hours before bed. So my schedule often gets in the way of this. I have later evenings that I'm at work a couple days a week. I get home, so sometimes dinner's not till 8 o'clock. And then I'm also trying to get to bed at a decent hour. So I'm really pushing it on this one a couple nights a week. But this is great as far as limiting how much your digestive system really interferes with your sleep and how much we interfere with the normal digestive hormones that are released overnight. So no food 2 hours before bed. Sleep time the same every night. That's what we talked about up at number 1. And then ideal time with that, sleep between 8:30 and 10. So you night owls might really not be on board for this, but there are some really cool things that happen in the early evening sleep that is kind of wired into our physiology. So even if you're a night owl, start to shift things a bit earlier. Be realistic, be cognitively awake to say, hey, even though I'm a person who does well staying up late, maybe not as late as I have been, and let me shift that earlier. For the rest of us, let's 8:30 to 10, really make it a priority to get to bed so that we can be up at the time that we need to. And then just like number 3, no food 2 hours before bed, we're going to kill the electronics an hour to an hour and a half before bed. Remember, there's those 2 reasons for that, is the brain stimulation from the content that we're looking at, as well as that blue light stimulation to those areas of the brain that says it's morning when it's actually nighttime. So if we can knock out those 6 things, and a couple of those are related, so there's not as much there, for 10 days, I'd be really interested to hear the results of your challenge. So reach out to us, let us know how it goes, catch me at your next appointment, let me know how that challenge affects you. On that note, we're going to wrap up for today. That's kind of the depth of the sleep that we wanted to get into in this format. If you have questions for us, down on the bottom right there, email us, info@dynamicbalancechiro.com. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions to this, if I didn't catch those questions in the chat during the presentation today. And then stay tuned. If you want to be informed of our upcoming webinars, the ones that are scheduled or even those that we haven't announced yet, those currently scheduled are listed there. We don't have the full date for that Focus one in April just yet, but the next few are laid out. Email us at info@dynamicbalancechiro.com, and we will put you on that webinar notification list so that you get all the correspondence related to that, and we make sure you get the link ahead of time. On that note, very much appreciate you joining me, and we hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.